What if the poorest country in West Africa suddenly became the blueprint for a new independent Africa, kicking out foreign troops, rejecting Western aid, seizing back its gold, and building its own industries from the ground up? While the world looks the other way, Burkina Faso is quietly leading a revolution that could shake the entire global order. This isn't just a story of rebellion, it's the beginning of a bold new era. Stay with us, because what you're about to see might change how you view Africa forever. Could the fate of an entire continent be shifting right now, far from the world's spotlight? As the West stumbles through internal unrest and waning influence, something unexpected is brewing in West Africa. In a country long overlooked by global powers, a new vision is quietly taking shape. That country is Burkina Faso. Yes, tiny, landlocked, often forgotten Burkina Faso, but don't let its size fool you. It's making bold moves that could rewrite not only its own destiny but possibly that of Africa. And as these changes unfold, the world is watching nervously from the sidelines. No one expected a revolution here, but what if the poorest nation in West Africa suddenly became one of the continent's most promising industrial hotspots? And what if it did so without borrowing a single dollar from the IMF or World Bank? That's not a dream, it's happening now, under the leadership of Captain Ibrahim Traoré. Just century years old, Traoré isn't merely Africa's youngest head of state, is also proving to be its most audacious. When he took power in 2022, Burkina Faso was on the brink. Violent insurgencies had displaced nearly 2 million citizens. Gold was bleeding out of the country through smuggling networks, and the economy was propped up by loans from Western institutions. Most wrote it off as just another fragile state, but Traoré had other ideas. Without fanfare, he began by freezing foreign mining contracts. Then, in swift succession, French troops were ordered out. The French ambassador was expelled, and media outlets backed by Paris were shuttered. The country that had once relied on foreign aid was suddenly choosing to walk alone. Alone, but not afraid. Traoré made it clear. Burkina Faso would no longer accept aid tied to conditions. Instead, it would harness what it already had: its gold, its cotton, its youth, and its determination to rise. By early 2024, those words turned into action. The government nationalized several major gold mines, previously under foreign control. Overnight, millions of dollars in profits stopped flowing out of the country. A new state agency was set up, the National Office for Mining Control and Gold Commerce, to oversee and manage all exports locally. While critics in the West called it reckless, inside Burkina Faso, the move was celebrated as a reclaiming of national wealth. Soon after, construction began on the Faso Gold Refinery in Bobo. Crews worked around the clock, and by December 2024, the plant was fully operational, processing over 300 kilograms of gold per day. The entire project was funded without a cent of Western money. Every tool, every worker, and every contract came from within the country or from allies across the global south. For the first time, Burkina Faso began exporting refined gold under its own label, Faso Gold. Meanwhile, the government poured new revenue from the gold sector into infrastructure. A massive road corridor now stretches from the capital, Ouagadougou, to remote regions long ignored by previous administrations. The project has already employed over 12,000 young Burkinabés and is connecting farmers, traders, and families in ways never seen before. But even that wasn't the boldest decision Traoré would make. What if one of Africa's smallest nations had the courage to walk away from the continent's biggest economic alliance? That's exactly what Burkina Faso did. In a move that stunned political observers, the country exited ECOWAS, the Economic Community of West African States. The bloc had sanctioned Burkina Faso after Captain Ibrahim Traoré rose to power through a military takeover. But instead of bowing to pressure, Traoré rejected the institution altogether, accusing it of being a puppet for Western interests and a barrier to real African sovereignty. "We will not die so others may profit from our poverty," he declared in a speech that rippled across the Sahel. With no safety net from ECOWAS, no loans from the IMF, and no military support from France, Burkina Faso is now scripting its own development story from scratch. But this isn't just about cutting ties, it's about starting over. It's about choosing rebirth over dependency. And while critics debate whether Traoré's strategy is bold or reckless, on the ground, the country is already moving forward. Just outside Ouagadougou, a sprawling textile hub has emerged, an industrial complex called the Arax Burkina plant, stretching across 90 hectares and employing over 4,000 people, most of them women. The facility produces high-quality garments from local cotton that was once exported at rock-bottom prices. What's more, this wasn't funded by the EU or France, but through a homegrown mix of public and private Burkina investment. The principle is simple: if it can be made here, it should be made here. That philosophy is spreading. In the town of Koudougou, once a quiet farming village, the country's first cashew apple juice processing plant now stands. It provides full-time employment to 700 workers. And sources produce from more than 5,000 local farmers. National radio stations run daily ads, urging people to consume Faso, a campaign to support homegrown industries and reject foreign imports in healthcare. 2. The country is shifting gears. Burkina Faso has started producing veterinary medicines locally, cutting its reliance on imported drugs and saving millions while keeping jobs and knowledge in country. These developments haven't made global headlines, but together, they're shaping a quiet industrial revolution. And behind the scenes, Burkina Faso is forging new economic relationships. Turning away from Western capitals, the country has entered into discreet bilateral trade deals with nations like Turkey, Iran, Venezuela, and Russia. By early 2025, shipments of machinery, spare parts, and medical equipment began arriving in Ouagadougou, not paid for in euros or dollars, but traded directly for gold, cotton, and raw agricultural goods. This barter-style diplomacy bypasses global currencies and middlemen, and it's working. One deal with Iran, for instance, brought in over 100 modern tractors in exchange for 300 tons of refined gold and sesame seeds. No interest, no debt, just trade. But not everyone is applauding. Leaked diplomatic memos from Paris and Washington reportedly labeled Traoré a rogue actor. There are whispers of economic sabotage, cyber attacks, and covert destabilization efforts, yet none of it has derailed the vision Traoré set in motion. Young Burkina engineers are designing irrigation systems, mastering welding, and operating advanced design lab skills that were once outsourced or simply ignored. Enrollment in the country's largest polytechnic school has surged 40% since 2023. The youth no longer see their future in Europe, they see it at home. Still, every revolution has its enemies. And on January 1, 2025, that danger came shockingly close. Just as the world welcomed a new year, news broke of an assassination attempt on President Traoré. The attack wasn't just political, it was symbolic. A strike against a leader who had dared to defy the Western order and offer a different vision of African sovereignty. This wasn't a typical coup, it was a violent, calculated attempt to silence a rising voice that threatened the old power structure. Traoré survived, but it was a reminder: breaking free comes at a cost. Rumors swirled that the failed plot was linked to military officers with ties to former French intelligence. The government moved quickly to contain the threat, but the message was clear: resistance has consequences. Traoré now walks a path once walked by Thomas Sankara, Patrice Lumumba, and Muammar Gaddafi, all African leaders who dared to stand alone, and paid dearly for it. But there's one thing Traoré has that many before him lacked: mass support. In the aftermath of the attempt on his life, millions took to the streets. Farmers left their fields, students left their classrooms, women sang songs of unity. The people were not just defending a president, they were defending a movement, a new direction, a belief that this time, things could be different. Burkina Faso is no longer waiting for permission from the world. It's building something of its own. The question now is, can it endure? Can a country, fueled by pride and principle, survive the forces determined to bring it back under control? Because when you say no to the world, the price might be isolation. Or it might be liberation. Liberation songs now echo not just in protest squares, but across classrooms, radio stations, and rural gatherings. Because this isn't just about one man, it's about a new way of life, and unity. That's Captain Ibrahim Traoré's real weapon. But even unity faces headwinds. Burkina Faso remains locked out of ECOWAS. Banking restrictions from the West African Central Bank are choking currency flow, and with no access to global capital markets, raising funds for large-scale development remains a daunting challenge. So how does the country plan to keep building? The answer may surprise you: crypto. The government has started piloting a gold-backed digital currency, an alternative to the CFA franc, a colonial-era currency still tethered to the French treasury. This new approach would let citizens trade within Burkina Faso and beyond, without needing to touch Western-controlled financial systems. Meanwhile, military cooperation with Mali and Niger is deepening. The three countries now coordinate joint patrols, share intelligence, and manage cross-border logistics. What's forming is more than just an alliance, it's a new geopolitical axis in the Sahel. An axis built on sovereignty, mutual support, and a shared dream of self-sufficiency. This is no longer just Burkina Faso's story. It's a test case for what happens when a nation decides to stand up and rewrite its own future. The road forward will be tough. Mistakes will be made. But if this model succeeds, it won't just. Inspirit could fundamentally shift the balance of global power. Can Traoré really pull this off without foreign aid? Could Africa finally begin shaking off the chains of dependency? Let us know what you think. Drop your thoughts in the comments. Like, share, and subscribe for more on Africa's unfolding revolution. At 34, Captain Ibrahim Traoré became the world's youngest head of state, and with youth came vision. His administration hasn't just changed policies, it's altered the very course of the nation. From 2022 to 2025, Burkina Faso's GDP grew from $18.8 billion to $22.1 billion. Not with aid but through a self-reliant, locally driven economic model. Tomato and cotton processing plants, once pipe dreams, now dot the country's industrial map, cutting imports and boosting domestic production. Justice, too, is being Traoré's judicial reforms focus on accessibility and fairness, emphasizing community-led solutions tailored to real-life conflicts. This isn't about replicating Western systems. It's about building justice from the ground up. Culture is undergoing its own quiet revolution. In the wake of conflict and trauma, art, language, and identity are being reclaimed. The Recree Trails Theatre Festival, for instance, has become a national phenomenon offering emotional refuge and collective healing. In classrooms, indigenous languages like Moor, Fulfeld, and Dula have become official mediums of instruction. History curricula now feature the stories of the Mossi Empire and revolutionary African poets, not colonial generals and European explorers. State funding supports filmmakers, toy makers, and musicians telling Burkina stories. Teacher, in Wahiguya puts it best. For the first time, I teach our children about people who look like them. In Bobo Dioulasso, murals depict female resistance fighters. Schools and clinics are being renamed after forgotten heroines. National Day celebrations now include village assemblies where citizens vote on local budgets and contribute labor to rebuild what was lost. Rural gymnasiums host healing rituals, where survivors of jihadist attacks plant trees and recite oaths of peace. Cultural ceremonies born from local pain, not foreign blueprints. To new television networks, now broadcast entirely in local languages. Delivering news untouched by foreign spin. Schools are being rebuilt using stone, clay, and timber from the surrounding land, rooting learning, quite literally, in the soil of Burkina Faso. The country is no longer shaped by foreign narratives. It's being authored by its people. After decades of dictated policy, the pen is finally in Burkinabe hands. Burkina Faso is no longer just a nation reliant on aid. It's an experiment in full-spectrum autonomy, cultural and political. And at its center is one man's rebellion against the norms of global dependency. When Traoré publicly rejected foreign aid, analysts laughed. They called it idealistic, unsustainable, even suicidal. But what the West dismissed as naive, many Africans saw as revolutionary. Today, the phrase "do it like Traoré" is gaining traction. From Bamako to Kinshasa, from Conakry to Anjou, people are watching and wondering. This isn't just about Burkina Faso, says Dr. Mbi Inoy, a political analyst based in Dar es Salaam. It's about reclaiming our destiny. Africa has been conditioned to consume foreign solutions. Traoré flipped the script. Build with what you have, for the people you serve. The impact is already rippling. After suspending ties with France and removing its military bases, Burkina Faso, together with Mali and Niger, officially withdrew from ECOWAS. An economic bloc once seen as invincible now faces the reality of dissent from within. The so-called CFA domino may have already begun to fall. Burkina Faso's story isn't just one of resistance, it's about redefinition. A bold, imperfect, deeply African blueprint for what national liberation could look like in the 21st century. The world may still be watching skeptically, but in the dusty villages, bustling markets, and crowded classrooms of Burkina Faso, something far more powerful is unfolding. Belief. But when Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger walked out of ECOWAS, they didn't just make a political statement, they left a void. But that void is quickly becoming a power center of its own. In its place rises the Alliance of Sahel States, or AES, far more than just a military pact. It's a blueprint for a new West Africa. One without the French CFA franc, one without foreign donors setting the agenda, one where policies aren't written in Geneva boardrooms, but forged in the dust by soldiers turned statesmen, cheered on by youth who've had enough of broken promises. This wasn't a protest. It wasn't a coup. It wasn't even televised. But with the stroke of a pen, Burkina Faso did something that entire continents have tiptoed around for decades. It reclaimed its land. Not symbolically, legally, not with slogans or diplomats, but with a law that changed everything. The new reform is as radical as it is honest. It admits what few dare to say out loud, that African land has become a currency, traded by people who neither live on it nor understand it. Under this reform, all land, urban or rural, now belongs to the state, not to landlords, not to old colonial families, and certainly not to foreign developers planning golf resorts on sacred soil. This move may be controversial, but it's also visionary, because with unity comes resistance. Burkina Faso still faces terrorism in its northern regions. It battles inflation, food insecurity, and the consequences of global isolation. But what Captain Ibrahim Traoré has injected into the bloodstream of his nation and now, the wider region, is hope. Not the passive hope of waiting for handouts, but the sharp, tangible belief that Africans can design, build and defend their own futures. That belief, the conviction that Africa can stand, build, and thrive on its own terms, is quickly turning into tangible action. On Thursday, in the heart of Burkina Faso's central region, in the commune of Pabra, President Ibrahim Traoré inaugurated what may become a historic turning point in the country's journey toward true economic sovereignty. The CIDF, or Complex Industriel de Detergents du Faso. This isn't just another ribbon-cutting ceremony. It's a revolution in concrete and steel. The CIDF is Burkina Faso's first state-of-the-art detergent manufacturing plant, designed, funded, and built without a single franc of foreign aid. No IMF loans. No World Bank oversight. No handholding from former colonial powers. It is fully Burkinabe in vision, effort, and ownership, and it sends a loud, clear message: we can do this ourselves. Outfitted with advanced production systems and environmentally conscious techniques, the CIDF is expected to not only meet domestic demand for cleaning products, but also create a reliable supply chain that could serve regional markets in West Africa. It reduces the need for costly imports and fuels a new industrial ecosystem powered by local talent, local raw materials, and local determination. Hundreds of jobs have already been created, and more are on the horizon, from chemical engineers and logistics specialists to maintenance crews and packaging staff. In a country where youth unemployment is high, the psychological impact of seeing locally made goods roll off modern production lines cannot be overstated. But more than economics is at stake here. The CIDF represents a shift in national identity, a break from the imposed belief that progress must be imported or borrowed. It's a living challenge to the narrative that African nations can't industrialize without outside help. Because if Burkina Faso succeeds in becoming the first African country to build a self-financed industrial base, then that example may echo far beyond its borders. It might inspire a continental shift, a new wave of development, rooted in self-reliance rather than structural dependency. Already, murmurs of admiration and cautious optimism are being heard across Mali, Niger, Togo, and even beyond the Sahel. African youths, many disillusioned by decades of promises from abroad, are watching closely. If this works, if this model proves viable, then the entire trajectory of African economic development could be rewritten. The question is no longer whether Africa can rise without foreign aid. The question is whether more nations are ready to try. So what do you think? Is Captain Traoré's bold path the dangerous gamble critics claim, or exactly the kind of leadership this continent has long needed? Drop your thoughts in the comments. And if you believe in the power of African self-determination, share this story. Like, subscribe, and stay tuned, because the future isn't waiting. It's already under construction, one decision, one factory, one nation at a time.